Welcome back to Sledgehammer Horror, guys. I am Ken Sledge, and let's talk horror. Now, today I am joined by somebody that has shaped my life in more ways than I can express to you, the amazing actor and stuntman, Lee Waddell. Lee, how you doing, man?
I am doing great. Thank you so very much for having me on the podcast. I love doing podcasts because it's a good chance for me to, answer some questions for everybody that listens to you, and we're gonna have a good time. And we'll probably go down a rabbit hole or two or 10, and we'll see where we go. But let's have fun with it. That's the main thing.
That's really what I'm hoping for, man. And um, before we talk about the reason that you're here, though, Lee, I would like for the people that don't know you to get to know you a little bit. Lee has been a stuntman or a stunt coordinator on such films as Lady in the Water, Spider-Man, X-Men First Class, little B movies you guys may have heard of. And he also, as I said off the top, he is somebody that has shaped my life because without him, I probably wouldn't be the person I am today because he is the original Ghostface. He is Ghostface in Scream and Scream 2. He is the reason that we no longer have Casey Becker. So, first off, let's start, being.
Yeah, we'll give a quick shout out to my guys over there at Small Town Weirdo. This is my Casey Becker shirt I'm rocking today, and
That's so awesome, man.
Those guys are great. We've done cons together, and they're one of my trusted vendors. We'll get into that later, kind of stuff that we're doing with those kind of guys. But I killed Drew. Sorry, I whacked her. She died. So
Well, and I want to say about that, like, it's one of those things where that opening scene alone could have been its own short film. Like that could have been its own short film, and that could have lived in infamy on its own. And when you guys were making the film, I know it's such a cliche and corny thing to ask, but did you know how big or how amazing this was going to be when you guys were making this?
not even close. I mean, you got to remember, I don't know how many we had, like $5 million, if that. Here we are back in the mid '90s when we shot this thing, right?
Mhm.
And it was another classic Wes Craven project. I had done a bunch for Wes, and you know, let's go make a movie. Great. I'm a working stunt guy. And I was going to go in, pound out my couple of weeks or whatever, however long they wanted me, and then I'm off to the next show. I'm just a working stunt guy, right?
Right.
And so, no, we had no idea it was going to go like this. And I think initially, when we first looked at scripts, I'm like, "There's no way," wasn't going to happen. And then it almost didn't happen because we had so much resistance from the studios and the ratings board and the town council. I mean, it almost didn't happen.
That's insane to think about.
Yep.
Like Scream, and I've said this before on the podcast 1,000 times. Whether you love or you hate Scream, there's no denying the impact it had in the
Yeah.
horror genre. You look at the movies that came out in 93, 94, 95, and then the movies that came out in 97, 98, 99, and you'll see the huge influence that Scream had in the horror genre and how it flipped the genre back on its head. And,
It did.
the amazing cast that you got to work with on that film, you had Drew, you had the Fonz, Matthew, Skeet, Nev, Jamie, like, what was it like for you guys on set when you guys were doing such an amazing, and like I said, at this time, you had a lot of people that were still young, up and coming, but then you had people like, you had Courtney, you had, Henry Winkler that were all well established and have been doing this, had a good name for yourselves already. What was that like on set for all of you to work together?
So, it's like Wes had a really good knack at picking out up and coming talent,
Mhm.
right? So let's rewind it all the way back to Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yeah.
People forget that was like Johnny Depp's first film, right?
Mhm.
And I remember him on set. He's just some snot-nosed kid, whatever. But look where he went.
Right.
Barrymore was totally at the height of her career. And what's West do? He whacks her in the first 5 minutes. That was crazy. Top billing, she's gone. I mean, that's what, that would record scratch off in people's mind when they saw that. They looked like RCA dogs. Like, what did we just see? How did they just, And so Wes had a really good knack for pulling out young talent. And he was just a master of that. When you look at his films and the people that were in them and where they went and where they ended up, phenomenal track record of that ability.
Absolutely. That's something we've talked about a lot. And, the way that with Scream, he talks about, I mean, because for people like me, the big three in horror were always Freddy, Jason, Michael. Like that was the big three. And in the first 10 minutes of this film, he's referencing Halloween. He's referencing Friday the 13th. He's giving love to, his competition, so to speak. And to me, that was the ultimate shout out. Like, we're in the genre together. We love each other. How can I shout them out in the first couple minutes of the movie? And I thought that was amazing. And you had some pretty intense shots throughout the film, both films, really. Are there any moments that really stick out to you from your time on filming Scream or Scream 2?
Yeah, so I mean, my stuff with Drew, and I had worked with Drew before on another one or two shows, um, and that was probably part of the reason I got picked for that particular slot. Um, so working with her again was fun because she's just a pro and she's fun and delightful, and then she's so nice of a person. She's an absolute delight to work with. And then working with Henry Winkler, man, like I said, the Fonz. He was the biggest boy in the block, growing up on that guy. He was huge, superstar, right? And here I am working with that guy, and I grew up on him. So that was one of the few times, actually, that is the only time in my entire, 20, 30 years, however long I did stunts, that I fanboyed out. I geeked out on him. Hilariously funny. And I'm like, and I even, we were talking about it when we were getting ready to shoot the scene where I killed him. And I'm like, and we were talking about that, actually pretty funny moment. But so those are like the two standouts on that. It was outside of that, it was a movie, and we were working hard and working nights and trying to get it in the can and do a good job for everybody. And and here we are 28 years later and still talking about it. How cool is that?
Right. And that's what I was going to say. To you guys, you're just out here, you're trying to make a fun movie with a fun director, a really good cast of people that you want to work with, not knowing that you're literally, and I'm not trying to kiss up to you. I already got you on the podcast. I don't got to kiss up to you. But,
Yeah.
You guys are literally creating a cultural icon that to this day is still kicking. They're filming Scream 7 right now. I mean, it's still going strong. And in this day and age, you usually don't get the films in the slasher genre that go for that long, that have that type of longevity. Something else we've talked on the podcast, when you have movies, when you want to talk about the franchises that, in my opinion, have the longevity with the quality, you look no farther than Scream and Child's Play. I think when it comes to how long they've been around and the quality of every film, Scream and Child's Play are the two absolute best horror franchises around. And that, I mean, like, don't get me wrong, I love Friday the 13th. They did have Jason Takes Manhattan. They did have Jason X. I love Nightmare on Elm Street. They do have The Dream Child, and I think that's an atrocious film, in my opinion. And no knock to anybody that worked on it, but it's just not a very good made film.
You can't,
and so,
in my opinion, and I love horror, right? So that's where, and we'll get into that later, but, I started my film so much watching horror, the classics like Lugosi and, all that classic black and white horror back in the day. And, so we had, Dracula and Frankenstein and Wolfman and, all that cool black and white film is where I learned horror, so to speak, and, but going back to your original question, when you get legs like you do, I mean, look at Halloween's 45 years old this year, right? And it's had how many, 10, 15, whatever. It's got this huge run, huge following. Some of them have been fantastic. I still think the original is great, right? I think that's the pinnacle of that. As with most film, it's hard to outdo the original.
It is.
Scream for me, I love Scream 1. I think it's the best out of the franchise. 2 is okay. 3, 4, 5 kind of got around to coming back. I really liked 5 because the directors, they gave a good tip of the hat to Wes, right? And
yes.
So I really appreciated that. And then 6, 6 was a fun Scream movie. If you look at Scream 6, right? You take the formula of 6, right, and plug it back into 1996. Same formula. Obviously, we had a different time frame. Here we were a couple of generations later, or at least decades later. Same formula. Worked like a charm. I love Scream 6 because it's a fun Scream movie, right?
Right.
And I appreciated them bringing Ghostface back in with a little bit of an edge and decisive movement. The stunt guy that portrayed him, Max, is just a phenomenal talent. I hope I get to meet with him one of these days. I'd love to work with him obviously on screen. But I really like the job he did because that was how Wes and I first developed the character. And it kind of went off the rails a little bit and kind of came back now. So I hope they carry that edginess of Ghostface forward, because that's kind of how Wes put it to me back, 20 plus years ago, 28 years ago. So when we sat down, I'm like, hey, tell me about this character, and quote unquote, he moves like a phantom. All right. So then I'm like, okay, let's see how a phantom moves. Like, okay, we have Phantom of the Opera, we have Phantom of Paradise, and then we have the original Phantom, Bela Lugosi. I think that was Lugosi, right?
Yeah.
Right? Original Phantom of the Opera?
I believe it was.
Oh, no, that was Chaney. That was Lon Chaney, I think.
Lon Chaney. Okay.
So I kind of took some styling cues from that and then put in some aggression and, and we does this house. And so in that opening sequence, that is the genesis of all that conversation. Right?
That's so awesome, man. And I agree with you. I think that the Ghostface in Scream 6 is violent. No matter who's under the mask, whether it's, one of our protagonists, one of the antagonists, whoever's under that mask is brutal in Scream 6. And I thought it was great.
Yeah. And like I said, they did a great job on it. If you hadn't seen Scream 6 now, people go see it, because we're going to do some spoilers on it here in just a second. So I really liked it. I thought they put a bow tie on it, that very final scene, like when they're all getting in the ambulance and walking around with put a Band-Aid on it, wounds after being, looked like they did a number on him. I'm like, that was a little too tidy. I mean, yeah, you could have them live so the sequel will happen, but they ought to be bleeding out, barely clinging to life, and compared to what you saw on film. So
right.
I didn't appreciate the ending. I understood why they did it, formula-wise, and so let's go make another movie. I get it, but like you could have had the same formula succeed with people that are just barely grasping to life, and let your viewer kind of hinge on that until the next one.
Right. You're going to leave you a little bit more of a cliffhanger if you do that too.
Yeah, that's in my opinion. I'm not the directors. I'm not the brothers. So, that being said, here I am criticizing the guys, and I'd love to go work on the next movie. So that probably won't work out.
Well, and that's what I was going to ask, because we know that, some of the things that you've done, and I know NDAs exist, so it's kind of hard to talk about everything, but do you have anything coming up down the pipeline that you can tell us about that you're going to be doing?
Yeah, so outside of the cons and all the appearances and stuff like that, I just signed on to do a little B movie, no budget, a lot of fun. There's a movie called Night Butcher. And it was a no budget. They made it on a shoestring, and then it got picked up. I think Amazon picked it up, and what's the other one? Troma picked it up.
Oh.
And so it hit. It's got this cute little following, and then they reached out to me and said, "Hey, would you like to come out of retirement and play a character?" I'm like, "Hey, I'm kind of busy, these days." It's like one little bit part, 4 lines. I'm like, "Okay, you got me for a day. I'll come on in there and play, and we'll have a good time." So can't give any more outside of that.
Right.
But that's going to be happening here in the next 60 days, and it'll be fun just to get in front of the camera again. Just to have. It'll take me back to film school days when we were guerrilla film shooting and just, banging it out and having a fun time. So, as long as I'm having fun, I'm in, right? These cons are fun, and the meeting of the fans is what it's all about, and giving them and having that experience. And if I'm going to go off and run off and make a little movie, if I'm having fun, all in, right? If I'm not having fun, I'm not interested. So
that's exactly it. Well, it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, odds are, at the very most, we have 100 years on this planet. We got to have as much fun as we can. In that short amount of time, we got to have as much fun as we possibly can.
Oh, absolutely. And that's why I'm so passionate about, when I meet people what I call them the Scream Nation. That's my, name of endearment, terms of endearment, whatever you want to call it, of the crazy Scream fans and horror fans in general, but the Scream fans, the Scream Nation, as I call them, are phenomenal. I love interacting with them. So how cool is it that I could be talking to somebody that was a kid, 5, 6, 7, whatever, when we first shot it, and I'm talking not only to that person as an adult, but I'm probably talking to their kid. And so I'm getting generational. It's really cool to see somebody else's life that I never knew, never will, so to speak. And here we get together, maybe for just a few brief minutes, but we have this interaction and exchange of energies and ideas like, "Oh yeah, I remember that film, you wrecked my high school," right? And we laugh, and things like that. So it's really, I love the fans, and I don't care if I'm sitting there signing I've signed at midnight before, and if we get
Right.
kicked out, let's go have a tailgate party in the parking lot. You know,
Right.
I will go. I'll be the last man standing if I know I can take care of the fan base that makes this franchise what it is, makes it so I can come out and be with them and interact with you and everybody else. That's super important to me, and that's the driver on it. It's the interaction of the fan base and horror in general. Because horror folks, I mean, you're a horror hound guy, right? You do the conventions.
Oh
Man,
yeah.
you do conventions regardless of what camp you're in, be it vampires or zombies, but horror folks are just fun,
Dude.
right? They're
And we
just
love
fun.
each other.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it is a big love fest. You don't hear a bunch of drama. You don't see a
Nope.
lot of people banging on each other. None of that. It's just everybody's like peace, love, and blood and guts. It's great.
Right.
I love the scene. It's so fun.
See, and it's funny because you hooked me up with Bill, who I just did an interview with as well.
Yeah, not
And
only that, dude, not only that, I was like, hey, Webbs is a great guy, and I'm sure your listeners and your viewers will check that out. But you put him on before me. It's taken you and me a month to get this scheduled. So yeah, I was humored. I'm like, oh,
really, like, and me and him had this conversation too about how when you're in the horror community, like it's the bloodiest, goriest thing, but the people are so kind. And a lot of it is, a lot of people, people like you, people like Bill that have been doing it for so long, you don't forget where you came from. And you
no,
still have this really, really deep appreciation for the fans because you know what it feels like to be on the other side of that fence. You
yeah,
know what
it's
I
the
mean?
Will
So,
David, right? You know, uh,
yeah.
and he had told you that story, and it's a very true story. And we
Mhm.
came full circle on it 10 years later. And I'll let your viewers and listeners go back and check that story out with Bill. We don't have to cover it again,
Right.
but very accurate story. And so that's why I'm so blessed and humbled. And as much fun as it is doing what I do with the fan base and the interactions and podcasts like yourself and print and whatever that's thrown at me, all that's fun, but I take it very seriously in the sense that my job is to represent Scream, Ghostface, Wes Craven, all that. I'm serious about that aspect of it. Does that make sense?
No, absolutely. Like, and that's what I think is so special about what you do because you could easily be one of those people that are, hey, I'm here, I'm getting paid. When the time is up, the time is up, I'm gone. But you don't because you know that the people that are there are the reasons that the Scream franchise is so big. They're the
Yeah,
re-
well,
they
absolutely. I've been on that side. I've been that guy who's works extra hours to go see the movie when it came out in the theaters or rent the DVD, and you know, and times are tough, and I'm super appreciative of the people that work hard, and this might be their one big hoopla for the year, and man, they're going to come into town, they're going to have a blast, and right? If I
right,
could be part of that equation and give them that experience and positive thing, and sign some stuff and laugh and love and get some pictures, all over that,
right.
all over that. That's what it's about.
I really hope that I get to run into you at a con someday and shake your hand in person, man. That would be really, really cool.
Well, before we get off here, I'll give you my con schedule for the next, this year's slam. So I'm starting in about 30 days, all the way to the end of the year. So I got Central US and East Coast as my primaries for the rest of this year. So I'll be over on your side of the world here later this year.
Well, I'm going to make something happen to where I can be there. And you guys can also be a part of it by following Lee on social media. I have all his social media links down in the description. So make sure you're following him so you can stay up to date on all the cons he's going to be at, as well as all the future projects that he's going to be working on. Now, in order for you to change our lives in the horror genre by being a part of Scream or even The Lady in the Water, which I think is a very underrated Shyamalan film, a film that truly, truly wrecked me the first time I had seen it. But in order for that to happen, horror had to start for you somewhere, Lee. So I would like to go back to the past and talk about what got you started in the horror genre, your first horror movie. And Lee, the first horror movie that you watched was.
So we're going to take that in several sections. So we're going to take it from, there's three ways we go about that. Now I'm trying to hijack your question, but I can't.
No, fine.
So like the one movie, and even to this day, I hate it because of that. And it's not even the movie, it's the scene, right? The one scene that really jacked me as a kid was Wizard of Oz and the Flying Monkeys. Hated those little bastards. So, I mean, hate the Flying Monkeys. To this day, I hate the Flying Monkeys, right?
Oh, yeah.
But so I remember sitting there being all enthralled and watching it go from black and white to color and just digging it as a kid. And all of a sudden, these flying monkeys come into the scene. I'm like, whoa, I hated that. I did not enjoy that process. But then, like I said, I grew up on Chaney and Lugosi and Dracula, all this cool stuff. So me and my dad would sit down at night and we would just rock these old horror movies, you know. And so here's my favorite though. So here's my favorite all-time favorite horror movie. It would be Creature of the Black Lagoon. Right? Classic movie. And you know, during my stunt career, I did a lot of water work. It was one of my specialties. Hence Lady in the Water, X-Men, all this stuff, because I was on the body unit running those things. And I think and I was thinking about it the other day. I'm like, I've always wanted to scuba dive and do everything, you know, and be in that environment. I loved it so much. And I could actually probably tie it back to the underwater sequences in Creature with the Black Lagoon. Those were the most vivid for me, is when he's in the lagoon and grabbing, right? That was awesome. Love that sequence. And so anytime he was under the water and in the water, that was like, you know, because that's where he came from. He was like the lagoon dude. And so I really loved that stuff. You know,
Yeah.
You know, what is another one? The original Invisible Man. Right? Loved it when he starts unwrapping himself and he disappears. Like, you know, that was a great sequence. So I teethed, so to speak, on that early classic black and white horror.
And the Universal monsters, without those, we don't have a lot of what we have today. You know, like
they started it.
Yes, it really did. You know, with your, like you said, the Phantom of the Opera, Frankenstein, Dracula, all these movies really. And it's funny because the Creature from the Black Lagoon is my favorite of the Universal monsters. There's just something about him that is so off-putting when you're watching him at a young age, because it's all practically done and it looks so good. So do you remember you said you were with your dad? You were quite young when you watched Creature for the first time, but do you remember which scene it was, Lee, that affected you the most from Creature from the Black Lagoon?
Like I said, if it was on a positive, it didn't scare me because I was so enthralled with horror. You know, I was almost watching it at such a young age that I was almost watching horror at that time, technically. Like, once you're in the film business and you know how movies are really made, like it takes a lot for me to suspend a technical eye on filmmaking. It just never happens anymore. It has to be a really well put together, beautiful, usually super cinematography film to make me disengage from the technical side of watching a movie. I can't hardly ever do it. That's why I don't really watch too many movies anymore, because it's just, I'm like, oh, that was a great angle. Oh, hey, I love that cat. Or like, hey, nice lighting. It's all technical to me.
Yeah.
It kind of blows making a good movie. It just kind of screws everything up, you know. So like,
because that's all you focused on the whole time.
Yeah, so like when I'm looking at Scream 6, I'm watching Max just kick ass, right? And I'm looking at it as a stunt coordinator, as a stunt man. You know? Right. And it's just, and the whole movie was like that. I never stopped looking at it technically until it's all said and done. Like, hey, that was a fun Scream movie. I'll see that.
Right.
One, right. So,
right.
You know, unfortunately, I look at movies very technically.
Now, is that something that started at a young age, trying to figure out like the technicality of things, like how things would work in certain ways?
No, I don't think it started that. I mean, when I said I almost looked at it technically, I just enjoyed watching the movie itself, right? I wasn't necessarily scared by any of this stuff, but I like the suspense. I like the emotions that it dictated, right? In the picture. I think when I started making films in one of my earliest photography classes back in junior high, like 8th, 7th, 8th, 9th, maybe 10th grade, through there, we were sitting there and we're doing, I was in photography, right? And one of our assignments was go make a movie, right? So we pulled out the Super 8 and banged out a film, which was fantastically fun because me and all my friends, we just grabbed the camera and started shooting, and we put together a horror movie, right? So we had a buddy, you know, like everybody always has a friend somewhere in their school that's always bigger, you know. So, you know, back then he was already 6 foot plus and we're these little runts running around. So he was the monster, you know. He was the biggest one we got. I'm like, okay, you're the monster. And so we were looking at film technically back then. And that's what made, because now I have to think about, how do we shoot this? What's the lighting like? What's our background? You know, all this great stuff. And then from there, I went into film right after high school. I went over to UCLA, went into their film department a little bit, hung out there for about a year. And then by then, I'm starting to push into my own film career, right? This is the early 80s at this point. And so my very first film was that I was an extra on, just so I could get onto the set to figure out how things worked and get in there and play with the big boys and meet the stunt coordinators and the stunt guy, was Christine, John Carpenter. Classic.
Yeah.
Classic movie. And I watched it again for the first time in probably 20 years. And what a cool little movie. I forgot how fun that movie was.
Arnie Cunningham is one of the best villains of all time.
Yeah. Yeah.
The way that he goes from that really nerdy, dorky kid to just the, too cool for school. Like that was just what a transformation in the film.
And the scene that I remember, I was there for like a day or two. We were shooting the scene where they're having the football game. And
okay.
I was there the whole time just to watch and learn. And the whole day I was just drilled on the stunt coordinator. It's like, John who? John Carpenter. I'm like, yeah, whatever. Who's the stunt coordinator? Who's the stunt guys? And I sat there and just watched him shoot that stunt, and I'm like, all right, those are the guys I got to go see and meet, right?
Right.
And then here we are, that was '83, and like, I still talk to Dick Warlock. I'll have some cons coming up later this year together and things like that. It's, he was the guy that I wanted to go meet when I was first getting in the business.
Sure.
So it's really cool to be able to still know some of those guys are, they're getting older, man. A lot of the guys that I idolized and came into the business to pursue and get jobs from, those guys are getting old, and not too many of them are hanging around anymore. So it's a very, interesting chapter to watch that history go away, because, another 30 years, I'll be those guys probably, if I make it 30 years. So.
Well, like you said, it's a bittersweet thing because, you don't want it to end, but that you guys, especially then, they had a very, very good run. You still got a lot of time left, sir, but, like Dick Warlock, those guys, they had an amazing run of things that they did.
I don't know if there's never going to be a generation, I think, stunt guys like that again. That time in like the 70s and 80s was just, God, those guys they were just a different generation altogether, and
those are the legit tough guys.
Yeah, I mean, the guys today are legit tough guys, but man, the guys today are so specialized and so freaking fantastic. They do stuff that you can't even dream about 20 years ago because they're that super talented. But it's very specialized now too. I think I think there was a lot more well-rounded guys 30 years ago than there is today. Back then those guys could do it all, a little bit of everything.
But again, I'm not trying to poke at anybody today, because if you're doing stunt work of any kind, you have the bravery that you have, the toughness, the tenacity is intense. It is just, the intestinal fortitude is just fantastic. But back then you had to rely more on your stunt guys, your stunt coordinators, to coordinate this stuff, because you couldn't throw in a computer effect if something, to spice it up a little bit. It was all dependent on how you're going to drive that car over, how you're going to make that car flip. You didn't have the ability to computer generate something that wasn't there.
Yeah, I mean, back in the day, it was a lot more practical, and I think you're seeing directors actually kind of go back to a lot more practical effects.
Yeah.
The audience today is so sophisticated. They know when they're looking at CG. They know when that's computer generated. I don't care how good it looks, they know.
Right.
And I'm a big fan of practical effects. I like it.
Oh.
And
I've always had practical effects, especially with horror.
Yes.
Practical effects needs to be your mashed potatoes, and the CGI needs to be your salt and pepper. Sprinkle a little bit of it on there to season it up a little bit, but you got to remember what the main course is. You don't overuse your seasoning, or you're going to make your potatoes taste like shit. So
but because of CGI, the stunt world has been bigger, badder, crazier, huger, gigantonism. I mean, and I was in the business when that transition occurred, right?
Right.
I had a 20, 30-year run, whatever it was. It was a good chunk of time. And I was able to be in the business and watch that transition occur. And
right.
Like when it was first coming in, they're like, oh, it's going to put stunt guys out of business. I'm like, no, it won't. I said, you guys watch this. It allowed us to erase cables in a blink of an eye for about 2 cents. They're like, no, you don't have to black your cables out. You don't have to light it a certain way so we can't see. We don't have to shoot around it. In fact, paint them green. So it's,
Right.
the bigger the cable, the easier for them to take out. So, it opened up
Right.
huge doors. And look what's being done now because of CGI. Yeah,
Right.
so it's a double-edged sword, but man, I love practical effects.
I think that's maybe because I grew up in that too. Like I grew up with practical effects, and I think a shitty practical effect ages way better than a shitty CGI effect. And with a shitty practical effect, at least like somebody put their blood, sweat, and tears into the creation of that. And I'm not poo-pooing people that work, in computer anything like that. But just to me, growing up, practical is what it was, and that's what it always will be for me.
Yeah, yeah, and like I said, there's directors that are kind of going back. The pendulum is swinging back a little bit.
Right.
So I think there's a few directors that are actually shooting on film stock again, like 16.
Which is awesome.
I think Tarantino does that. I could be wrong about that, but I think he's one that shoots on a film stock.
That's awesome.
I was around when film was in process, and I watched Red Cam come in. Right, I mean, I was there. I was on shows where both were used. I mean, I remember all that.
Right. That's incredible. And like you were talking about, we were talking about Scream 6, Scream 5, Scream 6, the reboots and what those mean to us, and to the world right now. And reboots or equal sequels is kind of all the rage. Now we're talking about CGI, practical effects, and things like that. Would you like to see Creature from the Black Lagoon remade today with the technology that we have, or is that kind of let a sleeping dog lie type of thing?
I don't know, man. I'm kind of old school in that sense that I don't like reboots of classic stuff. Right?
Okay.
They just ought to let it go. And like the Coen brothers messed with True Grit, John Wayne, Academy Award-winning Western, right? I'm like, that is taboo, guys. Let that, that's an icon across the board. And yet they did a fantastic job. It was great for the film, right?
Mm-hmm.
And obviously Jeff Bridges. But I'm a let it go, guys. You're not going to do better than the original. So if they did, let's say, do a reboot of Creature, if they kept it in the as practical as possible vein until you really had to CGI something, I could see you going there. The less CGI, the better, in my opinion.
Right.
Use it, like I said, use it as a seasoning.
Yep, 100%. Especially,
go ahead.
No, especially with something like Creature, where you look at it and it's been so much of the practical effects with Creature. Some of my favorite practical effects of all time in the creature design itself, like the gills, everything about that creature was so damn good.
Yeah.
If you CGI that, like, I'm just gonna want to run my head into a fucking wall, man.
Yeah. So I'm like I said, I always question why they do a remake, because like first Point Break with Swayze compared to the second one, the reboot. I'm like, no, didn't work.
Right.
Too much CGI.
Right. Well, look at the RoboCop they did. The reboot of RoboCop. It was just the whole time I'm thinking, what the fuck are we doing, guys?
Yeah.
I would not buy that for $1.
You're correct, and I didn't.
So I talked earlier about how much of an influence that you've had on my life. And at this part of the podcast, it's really going to show, because this is where I always pass it off to my little buddy, who is you. And we talked about your first horror movie and what that means to you. But now, Lee, my little buddy Ghostface is here, and he has a question for you. What's your favorite scary movie, Lee? Yeah. What is your favorite horror movie of all time?
I'm going to go, once again, I'm going to stay with Creature of the Black Lagoon, because it has the best memories for me. And it was instrumental with me later in life, probably like getting into water work because of that. So I'm going to go with that one. And Scream 1 is iconic, and I appreciate that. And, I've had great iconic stunts in my career, like Scream 1, right? That whole opening sequence with Barrymore was fantastic. At the time, we didn't know what that was, right? But, once we saw the film, like, hey, that was really cool. I'm one of the few guys that got, like, in Lost World, right? Jurassic Park 2, I got eaten out of that Jeep with that dinosaur. Iconic scene. And great, loved it. And so those are great resume pieces. They might make it on the walls in 8x10. Great memories. Glad I did it. Glad it got notoriety. That's cool. But you know, Creature from Black Lagoon, I didn't find. I would almost classify it, even though it's under the horror genre, it's more suspense for me.
Yeah.
You know, that creature was, it didn't have the same kind of horror effect to me as like Frankenstein. The original Frankenstein was rocking, right? When you first see Frankenstein's monster get off the table, you know, that was cool. You know,
Yeah.
then you can see stuff like that was, you know, that to me was more horror. Original Dracula was more horror. Creature from the Black Lagoon, even though it might have been a creature, maybe because I was so mesmerized by it, it didn't have the same effect. But I found it a little bit more suspenseful for me for some reason. And I found myself missing the creature because there wasn't enough of him. That was my
right.
I want the water lizard. Where is he at? Right. I was waiting for the scenes where he popped up because I was digging on it so much.
And it's amazing because it's to this day it's still a love story too, you know,
Yeah.
unrequited, but it is a love story, and I think that that's amazing too. You know, this creature just wants love too. So man, we talked about all these amazing things and some of the amazing things that you've worked on, and it really is an honor to learn about how some of these things happened with you. And before I let you go, we always bounce back to the same question, Lee. What we're going to do is we're going to go back to Creature from the Black Lagoon, and we're going to rank this movie on a skull count. Now, we're not ranking Creature on acting, production, costume design, stunt work. We're not judging it on any of that. All we're doing is strictly judging Creature from the Black Lagoon on how much it affected you on your first viewing. So 0 skulls being not effective, 5 being extremely effective. You can use half and quarter skulls anywhere in the middle. Lee, what would your ranking of Creature from the Black Lagoon be?
I'm gonna give it a 5 because it had lasting effects, and even though there's a big horror Universal movie, you know, Universal monster reboot, you find Creature from the Black Lagoon is at the top of that list on the reboots of stuff. And by the reboots, I'm like looking at the posters, the t-shirts, the merch that they're making millions on, right? Which is cool. I love that. Creature from the Black Lagoon is at the top of that list.
I agree with you. I've said this 1,000 times. Creature from the Black Lagoon, there's just something about it to me that is so mysterious, and I love a good love story. The practical effects are amazing. That really, really got me as a kid. Because as a little kid, I'm like, that's a fish monster. Like that is a legit monster. Because it didn't look fake. You know, it looked so good, and the practical effects. I can't even imagine what he went through with makeup and prosthetics.
Yeah,
But
I mean, who is the guy that did all the underwater stuff? Was it Rico?
he just recently passed, I believe.
Yeah, I'm really bummed because I was really bummed I didn't get a chance to meet him.
Mhm.
Right? There's been a few, you know, important people in a sense that I've gone by the side that I never got a chance to meet or work with. You know, like him with, because you know, watching him do the underwater stuff is the reason I did my underwater stuff. You know,
Right.
that lagoon, when he was actually in the lagoon underwater swimming, you know, and even at a young age, I understood the scuba aspect of that. And that's when scuba was first rocketing. I mean, when was Creature done? 60, 64?
63, 64.
I would think it was a little bit later than that. Not by much, though. Not by much. So it had to be somewhere in that mid 60s range. You got your computer?
Yeah. Nope. I was just I'm still used to my computer being right to the right of me. It's not, man.
So yeah, that fascinated me, and I wish I had a chance to meet that guy and let him know how important that was to me. You know, so I got plenty of people that are in the memorabilia game. I'm sure I'll be able to collect some of the classic pieces from him. So,
Sure.
you know,
Well, and without Creature from the Black Lagoon, who knows if we'd be having this conversation right now?
yeah, but that, you know, that's life, right? You know,
Right.
making those decisions or seeing that influence or turning left or right. I mean, that's the game of life. We don't
Butterfly effect, man. What happens if you miss it? So I did say this at the beginning, but I want to remind everybody, I have all of Lee's social media links down in the description. So make sure you're following him on social media, not only to stay up to date on the things that he has coming up project wise, but also so you can come out to a con and meet him in person, shake his hand, because that's something we all love to do. And not only us as fans, but Lee's already talked about how much it means to him to be able to come out and meet you guys, and how much you guys mean to him for coming and supporting him at the cons. And so I'll have some of his scheduled dates down in the description as well. So if he's coming to a city near you, make sure you're going out. If you've never been to a con before, can't recommend it enough. You meet amazing people.
You gotta do it at least once. You know, if you love
Yes.
horror in any capacity, doesn't matter what franchise you're hanging with, you got to come out and do a con because it's just a big old love fest party. We have a great time every time. We have a great time.
Mhm. And it's not just the celebrity guest, you know, the people that are in the crowd, the fans, just like you and I, they are incredible to meet too. And the amount of time they take for their cosplays, and it's fucking fantastic, guys. So if you
Well,
haven't done it,
super talented people out there. And depending on which con you go to, I mean, some of these cons uh, are like Monster Palooza, right? Which is a big one,
Mhm.
West Coast, right? And Son of Monster Palooza. Those are working cons because they bring out legit industry working pros that know
yeah,
the tricks and they create stuff in front of your eyes on stage that day. I mean, it's a awesome con. It's a working con.
yeah,
It's a way cool thing to do. So, you know, they have those kind of, it's not just that West Coast. I just know Monster Palooza personally because I've been to that one. You know, they have other cons like that throughout the United States. As a matter of fact, I'm going to be in Virginia, right? Not too far from you, a little
Mhm.
bit. I got a thing called Haunted Scream Expo, which is in September, like mid-September, and they have Stan Winston's creation, which is his effects studio, which still lives. Now I work with Stan Winston
yeah,
directly on Jurassic 2, right? He and I had very direct conversations. Great guy, and
yeah.
so like over at Haunted Scream, right? Expo, his school is sponsoring like the makeup thing. And if you win the makeup contest, they give you like a scholarship. How cool is that, right?
That's amazing. That's
Yeah,
life changing.
it is because then you get signed on. And one of the other kickers on that is that you get signed on to an independent film.
Right.
It's a major deal, you know. So I'm excited to get there in September, and hopefully I'll get a chance to get out of the booth because I want to go see the makeup
Right.
competition and find out who rocks that thing. Because you're going to have some serious players come out to engage in that because they have the opportunity to jump into the game.
Well, and like I said, that could be extremely life changing for somebody that doesn't have the means to be able to do something like that, but has the talent, you know, and that's what it all boils down to. What the best talent wins. And that's something, if, again, guys, check this stuff out. All these dates are down in the description. So make sure you are checking these out because that could be you being able to work on an independent film and going to school for something that you truly love and are passionate about. We said it earlier, if you're lucky, you get 100 years here. Don't miss a second of what you need to do and what you want to do with your life. So, Lee, this has been such an amazing time for me learning all these things about you and how horror started for you and all these things you have coming up in the future. But please don't go anywhere. I have a couple more questions for you. Everybody else, if you haven't already, please make sure you like and subscribe. It really does help the channel more than you know. And follow Sledgehammer Horror on social media. All our links are down in the description as well. But until next time, keep talking horror, stay what you are, and we'll see you guys soon.
All right, be safe, everybody. Peace. I love you. See you at the cons.